and welcome to week 2 of Algorithms of Oppression. And I'm here, I'm Kay Novak. I'm with Isti Games and Sims, and we also have Chris, who will be doing the slides. Go ahead,
Hello.
Say hi, Chris. Okay. This is our book club, and it's a continuation of our Metagame book club. And we are sponsored and part of Isti Games and Simulations Network.
All right, and also remember to feel free to take a look at the introduction page as well as week 1 if this is your first time visiting. We'll be working on, obviously, algorithms of oppression as well as a few other texts and other resources that we bring up for you. So without further ado, on to week 2. So this runs June 12th to the 19th. This is our webinar. Yay! Feel free to second screen as well. We'll be looking at having everyone read pages 64 to 118 this week. Also, optional reading for those of you who have the Surveillance Capitalism book. Feel free to skim chapters 1, 3, and 5, and I do mean skim. As we said before, that the Surveillance of Capitalism, there's a lot of information there, so it's really essential to skim through it first and then come back to it a little bit later. Also, there'll be the slow tweet chat, just like last week, and the discussion on Reddit. And don't worry, because lurking is learning. Thank you, Dr. Truman. So the aforementioned tweet chat will be using hashtag metagame and hashtag algorithms. So feel free to go ahead and respond to those questions. We'll be posting them on Thursday. And you have all week to think about it and answer. That's the beauty of a slow tweet chat. So once again, those hashtags are hashtag metagame, all one word, and hashtag algorithms. And unfortunately, you do need to spell algorithms correctly. So spend a little bit more time so you can look at it. Write it down if you need to. All right, okay, so that's enough. So on to key concepts and constructs for this week. So first off, data justice. This is a slide you saw last week, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. So the whole idea behind data justice, it's fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of the data they produce. And particularly, we're talking about digital data. So think about all you do online, all that data you go ahead and you create by using apps, by visiting websites, by doing lots of things on the internet, and how folks are perceiving you based on what you're doing. So one of the challenges is, as Heeks and Rankin talk about, is data injustices. And these are the harmful consequences, whether intended or not. So things like surveillance, you're under surveillance. Someone's always watching. It's probably a bot, and it's probably downloading your information right now into a database, and someone's going to use it later. It also has a reinforcement of monopoly. So this is particularly important in a neoliberalist perspective where you have, you're looking at the benefit of business. This could help reinforce monopolies because it makes smaller players not show up on search results and things like that. But it also can reinforce stereotypes. So that's something else to think about when it comes to this data and how people are perceiving you based on the algorithms and the different rules and laws that you create. Are you basically strengthening stereotypes as opposed to trying to have more of an unbiased view of the data you collect? There's also harmful consequences of loss of privacy. Here in the U.S., we're very protective of our privacy within our doors. And online, not so much. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. And then you have algorithmic profiling. So it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just like normal profiling. It's just this one's using computer programs to create profiles. And so as you train your profile, as you train your algorithm, you start finding exactly what you're looking for. Invisibility or visibility. One of the interesting things that Zwitter 2014 brings up is that despite the data being anonymous in the sense of being de-individualized, in other words, what we do whenever we collect data is we try to remove the individual's identifying information. At least in education and educational research we do. Business marketing, we aggregate and we try to go ahead and keep you a little bit more anonymous. However, as we get more information, groups are becoming more and more transparent, which means that the motivations of a group that you belong to based on the algorithm, you start becoming easier and easier to determine how you're making decisions and your actions and patterns. And so the book starts covering into this when it talks about when it starts really talking about the search and how searches are becoming biased and how they're going ahead and they're creating a more and more transparency of just how biased the internet is. When you start looking at that, again, that's one of the negatives of these algorithms, is that it reinforces stereotypes as you search. So or engagement with technology. So are we going to be working for smart machines, or will we have smart people around the machines? This is a quote from Zuboff. And this is one of the things that you have, and this is the Age of Surveillance Capitalism book. And the whole idea behind that book is sort of the initial premise is going, are we going to be run by machines, or are we going to have people who actually work the machine? Are we just letting technology run by itself? Or do we just go ahead and we just decide, hey, you know what, we're going to exile ourselves from technology. We're going to let technology do whatever it does, and we're going to ignore it because we're just going to assume it doesn't exist? Or do we believe it's in our best interest to be engaged in technology, because that way we can go ahead and exert change on the different practices of these technology companies? Now, how do you exert that change? That'll be some of the stuff we'll talk about next week, about how you can go ahead and try to control who has that power and how can that power be given back to those that it's been taken away from. Then we have anti-discrimination. So in the book, you use an example of redlining. Redlining, it was a lending practice that is currently illegal, though some people wonder that it might still be happening. But the idea is that it uses data to discriminate when lending to a particular ethnic group. And so what happens, it's not about refusing to lend to the specific group. So we're not lending to whatever the minority is. Instead, what it is the reasoning used is the circumstances that is common in the community in which the individual lives. And so that could be a crime rate, it could be a default on loans, it could be a low income area, it could be a low property value, it could be lots and lots of different reasons for why you got turned down, but the effect is still the same as if they were redlining. So that's still unfortunately still a practice that many of the communities that were affected by redlining are actually still very, very poor economically because of just repercussions and then individual perceptions about that area due to those redlining practices earlier. And the other thing to think about with anti-discrimination is, as all of this data is being merged and mushed and resorted and sorted and messed around, how easy is it to make corrections of errors in your data? And do you even know they exist? So those are the things that you have to think about with all this data we're generating. Every time we're online, you log into YouTube, you log into any product online, and someone is collecting that data. That's why they want you to activate your cookies, so they can see where you've been. It's why they go ahead and why they ask you, and you get those little pop-ups that say you have to allow this, or do you want to allow geolocating? That's the other thing with mobile devices. Everything wants to know where your location is. They want to know where you're at. So what are you doing while you're accessing data? How far away from your home are you? Are you in particular hotspots? Are you at a cafe? How can they do things like that? So that's the thing you start seeing here, especially in the chapters that you have assigned this week. You'll start seeing some of this anti-discrimination issues popping up because of what's going on. And of course, both algorithms of oppression and surveillance capital, definitely surveillance capital, is all about this concept and construct of data harvesting. This is the systematic collection, analysis, and development of business strategies to monetize user data. So when you think about companies like Facebook, whenever Facebook comes out, no one really, not a whole lot of people realized it, but Facebook's business model was that you, the user, was the product. All they were doing is providing you the platform, and what they're using in exchange for that platform is they're going to collect data on how you use, what sites you link to, what videos you watched or liked or disliked. They're going to take all that data and then sell that back to marketing companies and businesses on how they can better create strategies to market to you. And the whole goal of this marketing is to get your money. That's plain and simple. That's what it's about. It's about how can I drive up revenue and get your money. So that's what it's about. And so if I see that there are certain times of day that you're visiting certain websites, I will start making sure that the ads pop up on the perimeter of your web page and on your banners, or you'll start getting emails and stuff, or push advertisements to your phone if you've enabled it, that starts marketing products that either you have purchased or you have searched for or you have clicked, or they are similar to ones that you have clicked in the past. And it's always fun when someone else uses your information and you start getting weird ads because of somebody else. Whether it's a family member who likes sports gets onto your educational Google account and looks at sports during that time, and all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of sports stuff popping up. Or if somebody starts using your Netflix account and watches a bunch of K-dramas, and all of a sudden,
or looks at vintage prom dresses, and suddenly your Gmail has nothing but vintage prom dresses on it, right?
yes, it's really weird how that defaults all the images to, and lots of Pinterest things, which is kind of interesting. So these are all different ways that we're talking about with data harvesting. They're collecting that data, they're crunching it down, they're analyzing it, they're trying to determine trends, they're trying to find ways, and then they're trying to, obviously, to make your life easier, because obviously these are things you're looking for. So we're trying to get that product in front of you so you will buy it. And that's really sort of what this is all about when it comes to data harvesting. So how does this all work? Well, the first place it starts off with is search engine optimization and Google Ads. So these are really sort of where we started to see the beginnings of data harvesting. So this is the origins piece. So Google Ads is simply the modern name to what used to be called AdWords. And so really all this is this is what's wonderfully known as pay-per-click. And the idea is that you go ahead, you create an account. You are the owner of a website. You go in, you create an account with Google, and what happens is you go ahead and you bid. You say, I'm willing to pay X cents for this keyword or this phrase, and it's a blind auction. Sometimes Google started to give you information sort of says like what is the average rate or the rate range that you'll see for what other people are bidding for it to help encourage you to bid competitively for the keywords. And then what happens is you bid on the keywords, you set your budget, so how much are you willing to pay for it? And it can be a keyword, it can be a phrase, and all of these keywords and phrases, they are common. The whole goal of search engine optimization and Google Ads is that you are choosing the words or phrases that your target market is using to describe the product or service that you're selling. And so all the different ways. So if you think of, say you're selling bread. Well, is it wheat bread? Is it white bread? Is it a brand name bread? Is it Wonder Bread? Is it Oro wheat? Is it, all the different types of breads, all the different things like that? Those are all keywords. Those are all descriptors. So that's all keywords, and these phrases they're simply ways people might describe your product. And so people go ahead and they bid for that. And so the other thing you can do is you can also set constraints, and Google's gotten much more sophisticated about this. So you can actually set geographically where you want your ads to pop up. So if you only want to have ads pop up in Denver, Colorado, you can choose the zip codes for Denver, Colorado, and that's where it'll show up. And so that's really sort of what you're seeing here. And how Google gets paid is when somebody clicks on that ad, and so you see on the screen here, you see these top ones that have the little ad icon. I apologize for the quality. Got pixelated a little bit when I blew it up. But there's a little ad in front of it. And so you see this is ads.google, business, linkedin.com/sponsored ads. So these show it. And then down here at the very bottom, you get the actual website where it actually gives you HTTPS ads.google.com, which is the actual website for Google Ads, which is interesting because this is people bidding for ads for Google Ads on a search about Google Ads. So kind of interesting how it sets up. So this is what happens. So when someone clicks on that, Google takes a cut, and that's when they take that money out of your budget. And when it gets to zero, it's done. And how this typically works, I don't know what the inner workings of Google or how they're weighting it, or how they're looking at how we handle bids fairly, but most likely the higher you bid, the higher bids show up first. And then once their budget has been exhausted, then the lower bids start showing up. So, and this is if you're just being generic and about you want all the world to click on your page. But as you get more specific, and that's where let's really start seeing people being competitive, is they start becoming more specific as they start slicing the pie more finely. You know, Denver, Colorado, or Denver metro area, Colorado. As you refine your parameters, the cost per click starts becoming higher and higher because you're getting closer and closer to your again, in this case, a targeted user. Now, SEO, search and optimization, is simply the practice of optimizing your web page content to increase the accuracy of a search and improve your website's chances of actually showing up on a search. And so this is all HTML code that shows up behind your web page, and there actually is a meta tag, which is one of the little bins that we look at. And so what happens is you have lots of information. The other thing that shows up in the HTML code, as well as in Google Ads, to give you this ability to write your own advertisement for Google Ads. And down at the bottom, what the actual website is for AdWords, you'll see that little line of text as actually from the HTML code on their web page. So that's all SEO. So when someone says they're an SEO expert or they're in search and optimization, all they mean is I know how the internet works and how search engine works. And I will go ahead and I'll put phrases and keywords into your HTML code, and I'll do different campaigns to try to make these search engines notice your site and make you show up on more search results. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kay to talk about critical studies.
Hey, everybody. Okay, now Chris went over some terms, and I'm just going to remind you about a couple terms, because in the readings this week, while even if they're not using these terms, since we're giving you the definitions, you'll see it, okay? Now, again, we're educators, so we're reading this through critical studies in education, and we're always asking questions. Who benefits, who does not, and what can be done about inequalities? Now, I just want to say a quick reminder, intersectionality. This book is all about that intersectionality, okay? This book really focuses on girls, Black women, and Black feminism, okay? So it's that intersection of race and gender that you'll see throughout the whole book. Intersectionality is a term that's from the 1990s. And like it says here, the nature of social categorization such as race, class, that create overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. So you'll also, as you're reading the book, you'll see the author will constantly be referring to intersections, even if she doesn't use the word. And in the readings for the 2 chapters that we're doing now, the author starts discussing race and gender neutral narratives, meaning that there seems to be, with technology, a lot of default to white males. And I can tell you, and this also plays into this next thing. The next term is colorblind racism. Okay? And colorblind racism basically is a silencing of anti-racist views and a taboo on even mentioning race. And I'd have to do a shout out to one of my colleagues who worked with me today, and we were working on a proposal that we put in and putting the abstract, because the abstract that we put in was talking about race, and we were asked to kind of rewrite it. Don't worry. We didn't code anything. We didn't code switch. We didn't make it so that things weren't being discussed. But this happens. And a colorblind ideology, it's different from other forms of racism. It doesn't refer to specific negative attitudes or hatreds, but rather misconceptions about race and racism. Like, there is no race or racism in the United States. We're post-racism. And some of the examples, the big example that that has often been used is because the United States elected a black president. Well, in the year 2012, with the re-election of Barack Obama, we also had the 2012 shooting of Trayvon Martin, who was a young black teenager who was shot in Florida, and it went to trial. And out of this, serious protests, lots of action on social media, and also this is one of the things that help publicize and get more information out for Black Lives Matter. So in the year that people were saying the re-election of Barack Obama proves we're post-racist, we had the killing of Trayvon Martin. So some of the things, and when you're doing the readings, you'll also go ahead and see some of this coming through the readings, that when it comes to a colorblind rhetoric pattern, the racial slurs might be in private rather than out in the open in public. There might be a semantic move by people saying, I'm not racist, but, or saying, I'm not prejudiced, but. There's also, what also shows up a bit is discussions about, reverse discrimination rather than discussions on discrimination. Also, a lot of the times, things are put into a diminutive, meaning talking about interracial couples, that instead of talking about race, they start talking about, oh, well, think about the children. What's going to happen to the children? There's also sometimes an incoherence when it comes to talking about this, people not being comfortable enough to talk about race. And also what can show up, and I added this one at the end because everything else is from Bonilla Silva, and it's his writings in 2002. The last one is White Emotionality and White Fragility. And this is some of the newer terms when it comes to critical whiteness studies. And this is how talking about race often makes people who are white emotional and upset about the talking about race. So these are some of the rhetoric patterns. And this week, what we're reading really does, in her book, she has lots of Google searches on different things that you can go ahead and look up. And she talks about what she found and what other people found in them. So these are some of the constructs so that you can be aware of these. And this is one of the examples I wanted to pull. This was from last week. And I'm going to do the same thing and apologize for the pixelation on it. This was in the Dallas School District. This was the valedictorian, who is Ruah Hagar, and she is a refugee from Iran, and she's a valedictorian of her school. Now, we have the link there, and I suggest everyone go and watch this quick video. What happens in this quick video is she's giving her valedictorian speech, and she wants to mention Trayvon Martin in her speech, and her principal has already looked at the speech. He told her not to do that. And if you watch the video, and unfortunately it's on Twitter, and we respect intellectual property, so we did not bring it down here, but what you'll see is her giving the speech. She starts with Trayvon Martin's name. You'll see her principal make a gesture, and her principal is on the right-hand side of her, make a gesture to have the mic cut off. The mic gets cut off from her. And then he comes up to the mic, and then the mic is working. Now, this has been reported on. I don't think it's been reported on enough. I would like to know more of the facts, but this would be an example of, we're post-racial. This would cause too much commotion. This would make people feel uncomfortable. This is some examples of colorblind racism. And next slide, please. So this one. Okay, so Chris is just going to click on the button. So you're not hearing the audio of this, but again, we are putting the slides up, and this is an example straight out of the book. This was in 2006. This was Ali, and what he does is he goes ahead and he puts in the words 3 black teenagers and the words 3 white teenagers, and the different images that he got. And this is only 3 years ago. Now this one, and this is YouTube, so we embedded it, and we'll also put up the link. But this is a video, and it went viral, about a soap dispenser at Facebook. And what this soap dispenser does is it recognizes the palm of the white person in there, but does not recognize the palm of the black person who goes to use it. And we'll let it play just a little more, and you'll see what he does to get the soap dispenser to work. And this is one of our examples of a dominant tech culture, and a dominant tech culture having a view of, a soap dispenser. What color should it say? So here's the question we're going to ask, and this is something that the book's author also talks about. Is there a normalization of whiteness and masculinity in technology? I have my own view. And please read this week, read supplementals, go and find your own sources, and come back to us next week and let us know what you think the answer to this question is. Now, I'm going to go over, and this is kind of a heuristic or a rule of thumb. And people have been making rules of thumb when it comes to diversity and testing out things like fiction and movies. And so I wanted to go over some of the quick ones, because you might remember these. These might be good ones to even discuss with your students. Now, the first one is the Bechdel Wallace test. And this is actually from 1986. And it's a measure of the representation of women in fiction, and whether it's fiction or a movie. It asks whether a work, so think of a movie or a TV series or a book that's being read, do at least two women talk to each other about something other than a man? And then also they add the requirement sometimes that the two women who are talking about something other than a man must actually be given names as characters. So this is the one that kind of started it all, and we're going to show you a couple of other ones. Now, I know I might be smiling and laughing a little bit about these, but I actually think they're a valid way to talk about certain things. Now, okay, I will tell you, I'm a gamer. I love action movies. I love science fiction. I love fantasy. So the Mako Mori test meant a lot to me. And to tell you the truth, I loved Pacific Rim, okay? Because as a gamer, why wouldn't I want to get in one of those Jaegers? And for someone who hasn't watched the movie, Jaeger, which means hunter in German, are the big robots, okay? Big robots that defend the planet, okay? I would yeah, I know. You can giggle if you want. But I would love to get into one of them. As a gamer, that would be my dream, to get into one of those rather than just playing on the video screen, right? Well, in this movie, there is only one female character, Mako Mori. And this Mako Mori test asks whether the female character has a narrative arc that is not supporting a man's story. And you can't say that with her, okay? Because one of the heroes of the story, she was found as a little child by him, and they're showing a little bit of that there, and he raises her and brings her up in that, and the other one is the outsider, or the outsider who comes in, who used to do this, but got away from it and is now coming back. She's his part. She ends up being his partner when it comes to these Jaegers. So everything about her supports the male characters, okay? And the awful thing is, in the series of Pacific Rim, she is killed off really early in a helicopter crash that has no exciting fight, doesn't allow her to do anything heroic, and just happens. So very, very, very disappointing. But we are the ISTE Games and Simulations Network, so we had to mention the Mako Mori test, okay? When you're showing your students videos, if they're watching films, if they're writing about them, why not ask them, where were the female characters in this? Go ahead, next. Okay, the DuVernay Test. This was suggested as a way to look at people of color being in films, TVs, miniseries, media in general. And here's the questions about it. Are there two named characters of color in the movie? Do they have dialogue? Are they not romantically involved with each other? Do they have dialogue that isn't comforting or supporting a white character? Much like the Mako Mori test about, that the character's purpose is to support the narrative of the male characters. Well, this is to support the narrative of the white person. And then this last question is one of them definitely not a magic stock character? Meaning, and Chris, you can go ahead and click on it for Wikipedia has a version of it up. It's Spike Lee who started talking about some version of this. And it's usually a supporting stock character in a movie who has special insights or something like mystical powers. And the one that gets mentioned a lot here is Will Smith in the golfing movie. And Chris, what's the name of that? It's Bagger Vance. Oh, The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Yeah, Legend of Bagger Vance.
Yes, and where Will Smith's character played the golf caddy who could somehow go ahead and figure out all these mystical ways to play golf. I'm not a golfer, so I'm just going to call them mystical.
All right.
And then this next one is for.
I feel like I have to say, but wait, there's more.
Okay, there is more. I'm sorry, but these are heuristics. Okay, they're tests, but they're heuristics that you can think about when you're seeing this. Now, this one is for academics. It's called the Gray Test, and Kristen and I are involved in a journal, and we have made the Gray Test part of our call for proposals. Okay, to pass the Gray Test, and this is named after Kashana Gray. She is a communications professor. She did some great work on Xbox and minorities, and Xbox and the minorities being communities of Black women who were lesbians. And she did some great work on gaming and communications there. And she was the one who first proposed this. And you'll start hearing that a lot of these tests here kind of started happening over social media. And the Gray Test started on her blog and then ended up being discussed more over social media. But if you're publishing a journal article, you must not only cite the scholarship of at least two women. So if you're publishing an article, you have to diversify the research and the people whose research you're looking at. So cite the scholarship of at least two women and two non-white authors. But it has to be meaningfully, in the body of the text. Okay, and then further discussion on the Twitterverse suggested to change it to at least two women or non-binary scholars. So that's the Gray Test. If you are writing an article, if you're working on your dissertation, if you're writing a book chapter, this is the Gray Test for citation. And like Chris said, and yet there's more. Here's another example. Okay, this is one for science journalism. It's called the Finkbeiner test. Okay, the checklist here is, in fact, a negative checklist. If an article is being written about a woman who is a scientist, the article should not say somewhere in there that this is a woman. This is a woman. The article should not mention her husband's job, should not mention her child care arrangements, should not mention that she was taken aback by the competitiveness in her field. It should not be mentioned that she is a role model for other women, and should not mention how she's the first woman too. All of these things, like Chris was talking about data supporting stereotypes, all of these things support a stereotype that a woman being a scientist is something that's exceptional, instead of actually acknowledging how many women are scientists, and that perhaps her biggest achievement wasn't overcoming her childcare arrangements, or isn't how her job relates to her husband's job. So this is the Finkbeiner test. This one, it doesn't have a name yet, but it's the Bechdel test for programmers. So how we started out with how do you have the Bechdel test to show that women are being represented in work of fiction? This is for programmers. Does your project pass the Bechdel test? To pass, a function is written by a woman developer, must be called out by a function written by another woman developer. Okay, and there's a government agency that did, in fact, go ahead and see how well their actual organization was doing. Okay, so one of the last things I want to mention, and this is part of the readings this week, and it talks about what happens when you Google black on white crime. And as the author mentioned, things are changing, and Google has been adjusting some things, especially when they're brought out to the public. I just wanted to mention that if you Google it, you will know what you won't see is, and if you go to the next slide, Chris, is one of the organizations that does a phenomenal job when it comes to reporting about race and racial crime, and that's the Southern Poverty Law Center. And this is a shout out to the teachers, because it was actually just yesterday, June 11th, where they came out with, and this has been discussed in the research, and I know at my doctoral program, this is a topic that comes up a lot. Corporal punishment in schools disproportionately affects Black students and students with disabilities. This is something that when you do your Google searches, chances are this will not come up. But I want to do a shout out to the Southern Poverty Law Center to show you a couple more things that they do really well. And so the next slide. And I shouldn't say that they do well, because this is not something that anyone wants to actually happen. And it's very sad that we have to put this up. But this is their hate map. They track hate groups across the United States, and they have gone to do this data visualization so that you can see where they're located, the names of the different ones, a little information about why they're reporting on them. So this is an example of data visualization that I would say done well, data justice done well. And we're just about to end, but I wanted to bring up a term last time was neoliberalism. And this is one of the quotes straight out of the book. Black women as the targets of a variety of neoliberal science, technology, and digital innovation programs. And if you go to the next slide, some of the examples are especially, and race and gender intersection, but also the gender shows up a lot. And this is where these pipeline issues, where instead of talking about what's really happening or trying to solve the problem now, it's been determined by neoliberal nonprofit organizations that it's a pipeline issue. If we just get more girls studying math and science, everything will be taken care of without addressing any of the systemic, racial, or sexist problems that are out there. So, and again, nothing can be done today. We invest in the future. Well, I am a community college educator, so I'm not waiting to the future for my students, because my students range in age from 16 to 60 years of age. So it's not a pipeline issue. It's about them learning now.
Agreed. So just to wrap up, so these are the questions for week 2. So one of the things you'll notice on the website this week is the hashtag MMIW, which is the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women hashtag that came out. That's been out, but now it's really gotten a lot of media coverage in the last 2 weeks. And the main reason for that is Canada finished their study, and they found that there was an Indigenous women and girls genocide by the Canadian government. So they put that report out. 15100 plus is the section it falls under. In the U.S., we also address the same issue here in the data from the National Institute of Justice. And the calls for more research to understand violence against women and why, based on their ethnic status, they see that women of non-white ethnic status have higher rates of assault, higher rates of violence, higher rates of murder as well, being murdered. So those are things that very serious topics we're looking at, and this goes back to kind of that visibility piece here, because this data has always been there. The data is there, just no one's really looked at it in a very in this sort of light. And that's one of the interesting things now, is since that data is out there and everyone has access to it, they can go ahead and start finding these pieces from data justice. So you have here a snapshot from 71 urban cities in the United States. You can see that 506 cases are reported, identified, likely an undercount, because again, these are some of these things, a lot of these assaults are not reported, and violence against women are not reported. So these are really good resources to look at and think about the data, and some of the, and also be wondering about the data. Exactly what I said, is it looking at its underreporting? Look at some of the flaws in the data collection methods that might be going out there. How is that data collected? We also cover congressional acts, the Non-Invisible Act, as well as Savannah's Act that's there, that was put forward, and then it was shot down, and then now it's been reintroduced by Senator Murkowski. So lots of information for you to really look at this rapidly emerging issue that right now is very top of mind for a lot of folks. So other things we'll look at is really quickly the questions that are out there. So the questions are, what pressures do you feel when you engage with technology or technologies? Looking at National Day of Awareness for the missing and murdered Native women and girls was observed. Do you see anything about this in your social media, news, or streams? Again, looking at it as well, but instead of using a popular search engine, try looking at DuckDuckGo and see what you can find with it. So, or you can search on Google as well if you want. But the other thing is what are your thoughts on companies monetizing your data? Do you own the data, or do they? And so sort of we've got a mix of questions for you to look at and respond. We look forward to hearing from you and responding and having a good discussion, either via slow tweet, chat, or discussing it via the Reddit. So with that, thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a good night. And again, we will see you during the week online, and see you next week on the Hangout. Bye.